that when a conversion takes place, the home becomes exclusively Jewish. One barometer simply might be, what about Jewish education? 85% of American Jews get some form of Jewish education. Among conversionary families, it's 90%. So in that respect, yes, people convert to Judaism because they want to raise Jewish homes. That, if you will, is the one bright spot. But the number of converts is woefully small. It's gone down, as I said, about 15%. Let me turn to a second area. Let me continue with this for 1 more second. That distancing from matters Jewish, which I spoke of Friday night, is actually best expressed in an incredibly low affiliation rate. Only 31% of Jews are members of any Jewish organization. Most I mean that usually members of synagogues. The synagogue is the grassroots Jewish organization, although I'm not excluding others. But less than 1 in 3 are members of something. Now, it's true that many of them will become members, especially when they have children of an eligible age, pre-bar mitzvah. Many of them will stop being members once the kids go through the bar mitzvah. However, at any one moment in time, you can count, if you will, on 1/3 of the American Jewish community to stand up and be counted. In other words, those who are affiliated. That creates all sorts of problems for us. That on the one hand, we appear much weaker than we actually would like to see ourselves. There, if you will, is almost kind of mythology about Jewish political influence and political clout. And that's oftentimes based upon large numbers of Jews identifying as Jews. The challenge here, though, I think is somewhat more nuanced. First of all, in terms of election patterns, Jews do vote. 83% of American Jews intend to vote in the 2014 election, which is an off-year election. And that was not a major election. Take the 2000 election, Gore versus Bush, one of the most hotly contested elections in American history. Less than 50% of Americans voted. So the fact that Jews vote in disproportionate numbers, now it's 50% of Americans, but 83% of Jews, that increases Jewish political influence. Secondly, we have a lot to be thankful for in terms of the American Electoral College system. It awards minorities the right to express themselves because minorities tend to concentrate as opposed to being spread out across the country. Jews are concentrated in those states that have the greatest number of electoral votes. New York, California, Florida, Texas, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Illinois. In other words, the fact that Jews are not in Wyoming should not really bother us. There are more Jews ski in Wyoming that live in Wyoming. Well, Wyoming has 3 electoral votes. In other words, a politician doesn't have to worry about the Jewish vote if all votes are counted equally. All votes are not counted equally. Now, some people object to that and say it's not fair. They say Gore should have won the election because he won the popular vote. My response to that is that in the history of American politics, that has happened once since 1888, the Gore-Bush election. It happens once in 130 years. That's not such a bad ratio. The reward of the Electoral College is that it gives minorities such as the Jews disproportionate political influence. Secondly, something that, again, we should not take for granted is that elections are extremely expensive, and Jews have been willing to expend their monies on it. Obviously, I find it a bit unsightly when it's done in such a coarse way, as was done by at least one major Jewish philanthropist this year. But the fact of the presence of Jewish philanthropic power, Jewish economic power, inside electoral campaigns may be something we're not that comfortable talking about. But don't take it for granted. Elections cost money. Politicians have to raise money. They listen to those people that they're raising money from. But thirdly, and this is something in terms of understanding American Jewry we should not only not take for granted, we should celebrate. So much of the political discourse in this country is articulated by Jewish intellectuals, Jewish writers, Jewish editors, Jewish contributors. Go tomorrow to a magazine store, see the roster of magazines. They go from the far left to the far right, with many points in between. And all along the road, you will see Jewish editors, Jewish contributors, Jewish writers. I just picked up the columns of Charles Krauthammer, a wonderful Jewish intellectual who's been writing for the Washington Post, for Time magazine, for God knows how long. He collected many of his columns into a wonderful book. I will confess, full disclosure, he does cite me at one point, so I couldn't resist. I was also going at a 30% discount, so I took advantage of that. But the bottom line is that if you're a political figure, you cannot ignore what Krauthammer has to say. And what Krauthammer has to say is also what many Jews are thinking. So Jewish intellectual power, which is not related to Jewish numbers of Jews, and not related to Jewish financial power. Jewish intellectual power is the critical ingredient in Jewish political influence. The weakness in Jewish political influence is also there, has to be reckoned with, and also may be changing. And again, here, let me give you one particular set of data. 70% of American Jews regard themselves as Democrats. 22% as Republicans. That, to me, is one of the weaknesses, not because I'm making a partisan speech, I'm not allowed to tell you how I voted, and number one, I wouldn't even if I were allowed. But it's a weakness for a totally different reason. Namely, since 1928, the rule of Jewish political behavior has been ironclad. Jews will vote for the more liberal candidate, provided that candidate is not anti-Israel. And frankly, in a couple of cases, even that candidate has been anti-Israel. But that's been an ironclad rule of American politics. You can predict Jewish votes down the road, and you've been able to do so now for 85 years. When votes are predictable, you can begin to take them for granted, or as what took place during the first Bush administration, at least this is the way the story is told, when Jack Kemp, who was then Secretary of Housing and Development, said we're taking a lot of hits inside the Jewish community because of our Middle Eastern policy. His colleague, Secretary of State Jim Baker, then said, well, I use graphic language, which I won't use. He said, I really wouldn't care about that. They don't vote for us anyway. Now, Baker's comment, once you put the graphic four-letter words aside, frankly, was a very accurate comment. In other words, that you knew the Jews were not going to vote for Bush no matter what he did. And the same thing has been true since then, before then. It's also true on the other side of the ledger. The Democrats will know the Jews vote for them no matter what they do. When you can take votes for granted, then Jewish political influence becomes much weaker. There is an Orthodox exception here, namely that among Orthodox Jews, it's just the reverse. Among Orthodox Jews, 57% are Republicans and 36% are Democrats. On the other hand, there aren't that many Orthodox Jews that would make that much of a difference here. So in that sense, if you're talking about Jewish politics, I don't regard the Pew findings as that much of a disaster. The real question is, will Jewish intellectual influence continue? Will Jewish financial influence continue? Will the Electoral College continue? And lastly, will the predictability of Jewish votes continue?